Hello, everyone. Welcome back to REIMAGINE 2021 V7. This is our 7th event. It's called History of Coins. So I got my Mario hat on. I'm Roshan Mirajkar, one of your hosts for this event. And I'm very excited to be joined by a returning guest. With me here today, I have Brenda Loya, who is the CEO of Tellor. Brenda, how have the past couple of months been for you and your team, given the boom in DeFi and the whole excitement with the macro space going on?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here, Roshan. It's been quite busy, I gotta say. There's a lot of people trying to take advantage of the space growing, and we always get inquiries on trying to get us implemented, and just keeping track of all the projects and keeping track of all, of working with them to actually figure out whether or not we're a good fit, and then eventually trying to get implemented, since at least our Oracle is implemented on the back end. So it's been quite busy.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense as the rise of DeFi keeps going up. A lot of the infrastructure, such as things like oracles, the importance of it continues to increase. Before we get into some deeper questions, can you kind of tell everyone, let's start with, how did you sort of get into the space? And then also tell us more from there about what exactly Tellor is and how is it different from other oracles that exist today?
Yeah, so I actually came into the space because we were building a decentralized derivatives platform, and it was called Daxia. And we actually developed it, we launched mainnet and everything. And the biggest hurdle on us getting users was basically, at least in our view, was even though our platform was decentralized completely, our price feed wasn't. And at that time, the only thing that was really available was Oracle Light, which is now provable. And that's what we were using. But it wasn't really meeting our expectation of security. So what we ended up doing is, after developing the decentralized derivatives platform, we ended up switching gears into, okay, let's just create a solution that we would feel comfortable with using and securing our users in a trustless way. And we actually did a hackathon in DC. We did it we did the first MVP of Tellor over a weekend. And then from there, we realized, you know what, there's really, as much as we want to start building really cool things, the infrastructure is still not there. And we realized that, firsthand, just because we couldn't find something for ourselves. And that's how we started off with Tellor. For derivatives, the reason we needed an Oracle was because a derivative is basically, you're placing a bet on whether a price is gonna increase or decrease from a starting point to an ending point. And you need a starting price and an ending price to be able to calculate whether it went up or down, and then distribute settle that derivative. So that's why we needed the price feed to begin with, because we needed that initial price and ending price to be secure enough, and so that nobody could game it, and so that our users would feel comfortable with doing their derivatives on our platform. And that's how it started. So that's basically an Oracle. An Oracle is just bringing in information into your contracts that they cannot get. And in our case, for Ethereum and blockchains in general, because of the way that they reach consensus, they can't access information from outside of their own ecosystem. And oracles basically bridge data from Web 2.0, just regular internet, into these blockchains. And that's basically all they do. They bring in data into the blockchain. There's different ways of doing that. The way that we came up with that we thought would be more secure is basically by leveraging technology that we knew already worked. We already know how to reach consensus on blockchains, right? We have miners, and at that point was mostly proof of work. And we use that to basically randomize who is able to submit that solution and get paid out some ETH. So what we did is we basically, we require miners to stake to be able to participate in proof of work. And we take the first 5 miners to submit a solution, to submit a solution and the price feed that was requested. And then the median value of those 5 becomes the official value. And what that does, it basically randomizes the first 5 miners that come in. And so it makes it harder for a protocol to be broken, because then you have to at least get the first 3 or 3 out of the 5 submissions. And also, if they lie, if they provide bad value, anybody holding our token, it can dispute the value, and then it'll go to a vote of the community. They will determine whether or not it was a bad value or it was a malicious value. And if they determine that it was, then their stake gets slashed. And that's how it maintains the security and integrity of the data, because it makes it extremely expensive. It's not the randomization of the 3, but the fact that they have to stake 3 times, and they can lose all of their 3 stakes every 5 minutes. It makes it extremely expensive to break Tellor. It's actually cheaper to break Ethereum, or at some point it was actually cheaper to break Ethereum than it was to break Tellor. And at that point, well, all bets are off. But that's basically how we work. Anybody can become a miner on that network, and anybody can become a user of the network. The way that it works, users come, and similar to Ethereum or Bitcoin, if they want their data to be processed first, similar to gas, if you want your transaction to go through faster, you pay more gas. So for Tellor, you just, as a user, you would tip the miners so that your request gets bumped up. And that's how we operate. But anybody can be a miner, anybody can be a user. Once the data is on chain, then anybody can read it. So that, I think, is also really important, because you see the gas prices on Ethereum, and there's a lot of transactions. If there's 100 protocols just asking for the ETH USD price, do you really need it to be pushed over 100 times? All of them could be just one tipper or tip that one price, and then that price gets put on chain and they can just read. So the way that we designed it is actually really good for the ecosystem. Like I said, anybody can become a miner, anybody can use us, and it's technology that we knew already worked. Obviously, it's a little bit slower because it's proof of work, but we're always looking and researching and looking into research that's being completed, and we're gonna be moving into a different direction as the research and everything and scalability research continues and improves. So it'll be faster, it'll grow with the ecosystem, rather than just start off at one point and then hope that one day the ecosystem gets them. The way that it differs from one of the biggest oracles in the space is Chainlink. And to my understanding, and I've gone through the code and what they have right now, I think their plans for the future are amazing, and I hope that they get there. We all want to get there. We all want to have really fast data. But as it works right now, it's they whitelist miners, or not, they're not nodes. They whitelist them, and I don't know if there's really no clear way, at least for me, from what I've gone through their code, to dispute or to ensure that whoever is providing you the data provides the right data. So I think that's probably more centralized. Maybe there's a contract or something, but in general, that's the biggest difference between us and them. It's just, for us, it's an open network of staked miners, and then they actually whitelist who's able to provide data. So that's one of the major differences between us. I think there's space for everybody. in the space. And honestly, right now with Ethereum gas prices, I think there's a lot of growth to, you know, a growth potential. So
Yeah, I think it's great that you have a lot of deterrents for like spam and other things like that, as you just mentioned with Tellor. And it seems like you have a lot of checks and balances. Those are some great points about things like usability with the gas prices. And thank you for explaining overall the differences, because I think that's important as well. From your perspective, what do you think is the future of how oracles, I guess, talk to one another? Because you were saying that we don't need, I guess, many oracles. Is that what you're trying to say, to guarantee something like the price? So do you think that oracles in the future will be more interoperable, speaking to one another? Or will it be more decentralized and people relying on a few oracles, kind of like Bitcoin, where you're just kind of rely on one network? What do you think is the future from your perspective as you see things right now?
no, I think from my perspective, because originally I was supposed to be a user of an Oracle. And I think that any responsible user or provider of services, especially those that hold lots of value, you want to make sure that your data is really secure. And what's more secure than actually having multiple oracles being able to provide you this data? There, we have started. It's called the ADO, and I'm gonna try to remember the I'm trying to remember what the acronym means, but it's basically a consortium of different oracles. And what we're trying to come up with a standard for oracles to provide data and make it easier for users to be able to get data from Chainlink, from Tellor, from Band, from Witnet, from whoever they want, and then be able to medianize from there so that their data is even more secure. Because every protocol has different aspects of security. I think that in itself is going, I think my perspective, personal perspective, is that that provides way more security than just using one specific oracle. And it puts a lot of the not responsibility, but yes, responsibility for their own users and their own protocols to the actual platforms. And it also gives them a lot of choices, because then if we actually have a standard, then it's easier to, okay, so one oracle went away or whatever, then they can just replace it, because it's a standard. And that's something that we've been working on for about a year. And we kind of like pushed it a little bit to the side. We're picking it up again. And we were actually hoping to talk about it more on, it, it's not, it's CC in Paris that got pushed to July. Or I think now it's canceled. But we were hoping to like actually use that as a platform to, you know, to start talking again about this standard. So in my perspective, I actually think that there's not going to be one oracle for everything, because to be honest, most platforms are very different and they require different things. And that's up to whoever's using it and whoever's designing it and their target user. And it might be that they need something faster, it might be that they need something slower and more secure, more value, or just something faster because of whatever they are producing. But I think in the end, it's going to be more for the user. The way that you secure your data is going to be by using multiple sources and taking advantage, leveraging the fact that each one of those sources, in order to break them, is going to be different and it's going to be hard. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, got it. No, for sure. Those are interesting properties to talk about for sure, and that actually makes sense that we wouldn't, I guess, just because then it would turn into kind of traditional finance, where that's how a lot of these financial markets work. Things like Bloomberg, and a lot of the data is maintained by centralized parties. So not only do people not have access to that data, but and many times there's like arbitrage opportunities only for the larger institutions. So this kind of democratizes at least access to the price and different things like that. So sort of digging into some of the use cases now, What are some interesting use cases you've seen either on Tellor or things that you're excited about? Because we've only talked about like price, and everyone always talks about price history, but what do you think is the future? Like, is it going to be voting, governance, like using oracles? And what are some things that you've thought about that you think no one has even built yet, if you have any?
Well, chorus is one thing that we thought would be really, really cool. And I mean, I think, I think overall with blockchain in general, it is so expensive to run. And I think now that, everybody's really looking really deeply into other chains and layer two solutions, I think it will get better, but it's still, as long as demand continues to increase, it's not going to be a cheap way to run anything. So I think, in terms of what's next, or what I see as the future of it, I definitely continue to see high value type of applications, only because it's expensive to run. And you have to take into consideration, like, if you could do it in a traditional database, in centralized database, and have the same benefit as the blockchain, then you should definitely stick to traditional centralized databases, because it's going to be cheaper and it's going to be faster, and you're going to be able to comply with all of those regulatory things that are required to run in that space. If when you're looking into the blockchain, you're looking more into of the fact that anybody can access it, that um, pretty much anybody can take advantage of it. You don't have to have $1 million to start a derivative or create a new derivative product on the traditional market, but you can do it and mitigate your own risk if you're a smaller player on blockchain, if that's your gain. If your gain is for some reason, maybe not so much in the US, but outside the US, not being, censorship resistance is important, can be very important, depending on where in the world. And if that's what your platform is looking for, if it's actually taking advantage of those aspects of, those things that are more likely provided through a blockchain than through a centralized service, then yes, like I think that in the direction that we'll be going would have to be definitely something that it's going to provide some censorship resistance, and to that it's high value, just because it's expensive. It's just expensive to run on a blockchain. So I still think that financial products are going to be, some of the biggest things when we're talking about, unbanking the unbanked, and looking into all of these other aspects. I definitely think that there's going to have to be layer two solutions that provide um, accessibility to these applications, because it's not just enough to develop them. If they're too expensive for somebody in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia to use them, then they're not going to use them because they're outside of their budgets. If my transaction on Ethereum is costing me $50, and that's the living wage of somebody, it's really not accessible to them. I don't care what we say as a community. And so one of the reasons I'm so excited about layer two solutions, and I'm hoping that we start looking into how we can really make those work better and integrate into these layer ones. um, it's because we want to make sure that whatever we're providing and whatever world we're recreating in the blockchain space is actually better than what we already had. So it's not just enough to have it, but it has to be accessible. And one of the things with Chorus is, with that project, what we were trying to do is going back to our original, Bitcoin was supposed to be used as a means of exchange. That's not happening right now. I don't know about you, but I don't spend Bitcoin, and I don't know anybody that does. Um, and Ethereum, I mean, we've been using it for gas and everything, but it's still like, the more expensive it gets, the harder it is to do this. And with Chorus, what we wanted to do is basically provide a template, because it's basically a template for anybody. It's open source for anybody to use. And basically what you're specifying is your parameters of inflation, of let's just stick to inflation. The way that inflation is used in the general economy, let's take the US for example. They've done a lot of stimulus packages lately because of COVID-19. And the way that you pay for this is basically everybody, the community, the US community has decided through their elected officials that they're okay with them using inflation to pay right now for what is needed to get the economy going. And we know that our $1 today is going to be worth, 3% less next year, but we're okay with that because we're like, you know what? We need to print this extra money to be able to get us through this phase. So with Chorus, what we're trying to do is basically do the same thing, but give it to provide a template for any community to be able to do that for their own community. So what they would do is they actually bring in, they create a token that's collateralized by something. They determine what the collateralization ratio is going to be. And then once they do that, they also determine what's going to be the inflation that they're going to be creating with this token. And with that inflation, they can assign a beneficiary to do whatever the community needs, whether it's paving the roads or donating it to your local shelter, whatever it is that the community decides that that inflation should be used for, they get to create their own token, collateralize it. They use Tellor as their oracle, their price oracle, to be able to do these conversions. That's how we fit into that picture. But basically, any community can come in, create this, and then use those inflation rewards to pay for whatever the community decides is important to them. And I think that, for me, I think this is an amazing use case. It does bring it down to the community, and it also brings it out into the real world. It brings crypto into into a real, tangible way of using it. And with Chorus, that is our vision. That our vision is that, we're just trying to provide something that is useful to people, and that's basically our vision. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. It's almost like a self-governing community model of projects that people can build. So definitely want to check that out. And I think that's also a slightly newer project that you all have launched this year. So anything community driven, we're always interested in. And even me personally, I love community projects because at the beginning, you need that adoption for any project, whether it's Uniswap, any of these things. They're large now, but once upon a time, they weren't as large. I want to get back to one of the things you said just about kind of on-chain and off-chain data. In your perspective for the future of DeFi, do you think that more people will continue to have exposure and conduct, I guess, market activity on chain? Or do you think that people will start to migrate into other chains, like most of the yield farming and a lot of the staking that happens is still on Ethereum? And that's a good point, that people are realizing the fees are super high right now, and some of this market activity doesn't even make sense, right? If it's going to cost me X amount of gas fee, it's going to eat into my yield, things like that. So people are trying to migrate into other chains. But do you think that it's always going to stay like on chain, or do you think we can somehow do yield farming off chain? And like, what are some of the drawbacks with that?
I honestly cannot see us not scaling without having some layer two solutions. Um, just because with anything, not just yield farming, but just in general with anything, as demand increases with limited resources, space, storage space, even from for the transaction Like that's just gonna continue to be. If it stays the same, then it's always the price is gonna be higher because you're gonna have to bid your transaction in. So I honestly think that we're eventually going to have to scale. I don't know who's gonna win this race, how we're gonna do it, but I know we're gonna have to do it because staying just on Ethereum or the main chains is just not going to be feasible. But settling to them, I think I think my perspective is that it's completely doable. It's just a matter of how or where everybody goes. And, you know, that is, I think everybody's just thinking about these things right now. Everybody's is looking at all sorts of different chains. I mean, there's Binance chain, there's Polygon, there's Aave. Um, Everybody's just trying to figure out what is the best chain to go to with the product that I have. And I think that that's something that's really important. It's like if you have a product and it could do a lot better on Binance chain that is a little bit more centralized, then by all means go Binance. Polygon is a lot faster, or Matic, whatever. Yeah, if it works for your protocol, now is the time to look into like, okay, which one of these actually makes more sense to what I'm trying to build, to how fast I need to be, or how fast I want to be in terms of transactions, and then how often are you going to be settling, and how often, like, what's going to be that bridge, how's it going to look. And I think that that's also something that oracles in general are going to start looking into, because we provide those bridges. That's basically our bread and butter, right? We're providing this bridge of outside accessing data outside um, of the ecosystem. And I think in general, we're going to have to move on to other chains just because there's no space for everybody. But I think that it is really doable to actually be settling there. And um, in terms of oracles, I think we're eventually all going to start moving into bridging space too, just because it's needed. Aside from pricing information, bridging is going to be a necessity. So,
Yeah, and that's a good point, because as we build more new products in the crypto and blockchain industry, we have to remember that there's those integrations don't usually happen immediately. Some company, it's usually the company itself has to integrate it, or even the developers it has. You need some kind of community drive. I think I saw some yield farming project recently. They were extending out to the Binance chain, and a lot of people haven't done that yet, but I'm sure it's coming. Do you have any experiences with, or I guess just your perspective on, do you think institutions will get involved in kind of helping to keep the data on these oracles more accurate? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying right now is the way these oracles are working. It's people that are either staking their funds or their power in order to guarantee that the data is accurate. But at some point here, do you think it actually makes sense for larger institutions to come in, have a stake on some of these networks, and just help contribute to that data? Because I don't think they can influence it the same way, even if they have higher levers or power, so to speak.
I don't know about whether or not they could influence it, but if you're an exchange and you're the one signing the data and submitting it, I don't think that there's anything wrong with them becoming one of the providers. I mean, most of the data of the pricing information comes from those exchanges. I think one of the biggest gains that we could get, aside from them being more players, I think it's better. More competition is better. But it cannot just be them, like, because then you end up really just transferring your risk from one oracle to literally just the exchange. And I think that's really dangerous. I mean, we've seen, what was it, Ethereum? What didn't have a crash, a flash crash, like a few days back. It went to like 700 or something like that on one of the, anyway. So with those things, I mean, one, I don't think it's good practice to just rely or have your pricing information rely on one exchange or one source of data. In general, for best practices, it should be more than one source of data, and averages are easier to manipulate than the median, just because all of these values go in. If you're going to do outliers, take out outliers before you do your average. And these are, a little bit more of data intensive mechanisms that are really expensive on chain as well. But in general, one exchange by itself is really putting yourself and your platform at risk, your users at risk. You should have more sources, and whether or not they become part of, like, if there was one of them, there was, I have no way of knowing if one of them is actually staked in Tellor and providing prices, but that's okay because they will still get slashed if they provide bad data. And if some other project is using us and Chainlink and Band, and see different exchanges and different medians, averages with outliers and whatever, then that makes it pretty secure. By themselves, just being a direct provider, I think that there's a lot of risk there. I think the biggest gain will be, aside from just having prices from them, and having, including some good practices in the protocol to make it harder to manipulate the price. um, you know, maybe a better way to collect this data rather than just an API, because a lot of the way that the data is collected is an API, and if the API is wrong or down, or it had an extra zero, or, what was the, anyway, um, I remember some of these things that have been happening, but let's just leave that in the past. But yeah, I mean, if the API has bad data and you settle on it, a lot of these exchanges have been able to do it right for their customers, and that's great. But even then, there's a lot of risk there. So I think that they can and they should, become active members of the decentralized community as well, because that's where they gain their value from, right? And I like the competition. I like the more players, the better. But just by themselves, I think there's a lot of risk.
And that's great to hear, right? And I love this I love these thoughts, and I think it's very common in the crypto industry where people welcome like competition and other competitors, and they always say like if you don't have competitors, then something is also wrong because like you're the only person building that product. So that's a good mindset to have. Kind of getting to the end here, last couple questions. I want to end more on a positive note. What are some of the opportunities just for developers and people in general, to not just build on oracles, or maybe it is with oracles, but what's the real, what are the two opportunities here that you see that like traditional finance just, did not enable? And then I also want to get your last thoughts on what do you think is the one thing DeFi will disrupt this year that people will not go back to using? Can be anything.
Yeah, wow, those I have no idea. But in terms of building, I mean, I think the space is so young, and it's also, hey, uh, we met a few years back, and I feel like we're gonna continue to see each other, and I feel like the same goes with a lot of the people in the space. And what I want to see actually is like see new people, see new ideas, see where when I started, the space was in a different stage. When you're coming in, if you're a new user, if you're a new developer, you're starting off at a different state. And I think that those type of people are able to have a different type of vision than the people that are like, oh, now we're building infrastructure, oh, now we're building this. But in general, what they could build, I mean, for me, just the most important thing to keep in mind is take a look at the current system. And I think it was pretty inaccessible to the majority of the people, the current financial system was. And what with blockchain, one of the things that really drove me to actually go from the traditional and into this space was that I actually saw a way to be a part of something that can make a better system for a lot more people, not just a percentage. So, and I think that when I try and keep that in mind, when we're developing things, it's like we want to make sure that we leverage this technology to create something better, something that is just more accessible to everybody, something that is more equitable to everybody. Because one of the beauties of blockchain is that it's anonymous. And the fact that it's anonymous lets you know that you're hopefully not going to be, and I don't want to go too much into that, but if I can see you, if I can just hear transactions and be objective about um, evaluating, then I can't discriminate on any other type of um, front, because that's all I see, and everybody has transactions, everybody has this, and if that's what I'm evaluating, I hope that I'm making a better, more equitable way of transacting, and in this new way, new financial system. So for that, it's like, I don't care what you build, but please build something that makes SEB better than it was before. And in the traditional system, it's traditional. You're not going to change it there. But here, you have the opportunity to actually be a changing force. So specific projects, what to develop, I don't know. But just do it. I mean, once you learn, there's two phases to building and to getting started on this space. The very first phase, if you're a developer, is realizing how different it is to develop on Ethereum than just any other language. I mean, there's storage limitations, it's expensive, and the way that you have to think about how you design the systems is different, how you save data is different. So build whatever you want to play with it, and then understand exactly how it works. And then I think then the next stage, the most exciting stage comes in, because then you have a better idea at what works here and how to leverage that technology. And I forgot your other question. So,
No, that's actually really great advice. I was just gonna say, that the main idea there is to build something better. I guess your last thought, I was just saying, what do you think in DeFi is an application or a product, anything this year by year's end, people will start to use and not look back? I think like last year was like, I would say just the concept of yield, right? Like many people are just they're comfortable with that. What do you think by year's end will be like another application or product that people will use on DeFi and not look back, sort of?
I don't know. I mean, I hope it's gonna be a 2.0, but I don't know. It's been going on for years. So I honestly don't know, but I want to be surprised, because I know we're gonna be building our things. We're gonna be doing some verticals, but I mean, yeah, I don't know, but I hope it's something. I would have never guessed that the internet was gonna end up being Twitter and Facebook and Amazon. And that's where we're at. It's social media and shopping. So I hope that we create something much, much better here. And to be honest, I don't know, but I hope it's something great, and I don't know, surprise me, people.
Well, the space is full of surprises, and I think the main idea, just talking to you, was just encouraging everybody to build a better world. Brenda, thank you so much for joining us back here at Reimagine 2021. Everyone, I'm your host Roshan Mirajkar, and I'll let you all tune back into the show. Thank you.